Ever wonder how your immune system actually works? It's like this crazy complex orchestra, and today we're doing a deep dive into the conductors of it all. CD4 plus T cells.
I like that, the orchestra analogy.
They make the calls, right?
Yeah.
Deciding when to unleash a full-on immune response, or maybe just like dial it back a bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like some immune cells that are more like the actual musicians, directly fighting off the threats. CD4 plus T cells, they're the ones giving the signals, the cues to make sure everything works together.
Okay, so let's break this down. Our sources talk about two main types of these CD4 plus T cells: helper T cells and regulatory T cells.
Yeah.
Let's start with the helpers. What's their deal?
So helper T cells, they're like the cheerleaders, right?
Yeah.
They get the rest of the immune system fired up and ready to go. They don't actually fight directly themselves, but they release these chemical messengers. They're called cytokines.
Okay, so what are the cytokines doing?
Think of them like the sheet music, yeah. Cytokines tell all the other immune cells what to do, when to do it, how strong of a response, that kind of thing.
Directing the action. And this is where it gets even cooler, because there are all these different subtypes of helper T cells, each with their own specialty. We've got Th1, Th2, Th17, TFH cells. It's like a whole team for every occasion.
It really is.
Can you walk us through what each of these teams is best at?
Absolutely. So each subtype, they send out specific cytokines, right? Each one is tailored for a different kind of threat. Like, imagine Th1 cells. Those are the heavy artillery. You bring those in for the tough battles, like serious viral infections.
Oh, wow. So that's their thing, fighting viruses.
They're crucial for that, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why understanding how they work, those Th1 cells, it's so important, especially these days with, always new viruses popping up, for developing new vaccines, antiviral treatments. That all comes back to these guys.
So that's their specialty. What about the Th2 cells? What do they do?
Th2 cells are more like diplomats, maybe? They're the experts in antibody production.
Oh, okay.
And antibodies, those are like the wanted posters of the immune system.
I like that.
They help to identify and then neutralize all the invaders, the harmful stuff. And Th2 cells, they're especially good at tackling parasites.
So they're making sure those wanted posters are everywhere. What about those other two, the Th17 and TFH cells?
Right. Th17 cells, they're like the first responders, always ready to fight off bacteria, fungi, that kind of thing. Like your frontline defense,
Yeah.
Quickly swarming to the scene of an infection.
And then the TFA cells.
Those are the support crew, vital for helping B cells do their thing.
Remind me what B cells do again?
B cells are the antibody factories. They're the ones actually pumping out those wanted posters we were talking about.
Right.
And those TFH cells, they're essential for helping the B cells refine their production, make sure those antibody-wanted posters are as accurate and effective as possible.
It's amazing how specialized they all are. But how do they know which threats to target? It's not like they have tiny little eyes, right?
You're right, no tiny eyes. But they have this incredible way of figuring out what's a threat. It all comes down to antigens.
Antigens.
Yeah, an antigen is like a unique fingerprint, I guess. It's on viruses, bacteria, any foreign substance.
So it's like a name tag for anything that's not supposed to be in the body.
Exactly. When an antigen gets into your body, special cells called antigen-presenting cells, or APCs, they grab it.
APCs. Got it. What do they do with it?
Think of APCs like the intelligence officers of your immune system.
Okay.
They process that antigen, break it down, and then they display little bits of it on their surface. They use these things called MHC class II molecules.
So they're showing off bits of the intruder.
Yeah, like a most wanted poster. MHC class II molecules are like the billboards, showcasing those pieces of the antigen to the helper T cells.
And then depending on how it's presented, a different type of helper T cell will be activated.
Exactly. It's all very specific. The type of antigen, the way it's presented by that APC, even other signals going on around them. It all helps determine which type of helper T cell gets activated.
Wow.
It's this crazy orchestrated system to make sure you have the exact right immune response.
So we've got these helper T cells all fired up, ready to fight. But what happens when they're done? You don't want your immune system on high alert constantly, right? Talk about exhausting.
You're right, it would be. As amazing as it is to have this powerful immune response, you need a way to dial it down when the threat is gone.
Bring everything back to normal.
Exactly. And that's where the other type of CD4 plus T cell comes in. Regulatory T cells. We call them Tregs for short.
Tregs, okay.
These guys, they're all about balance, making sure the immune system doesn't go overboard.
So if helper T cells are the gas pedal, the Tregs are the brakes.
Perfect analogy. Remember those cytokines we were talking about, those chemical messengers?
Yeah, the sheet music.
Right. Well, Tregs, they release their own set of cytokines, specific ones like IL-10 and TGF-beta, and those, they're like calming signals. They tell other immune cells to stand down. It's time to chill.
Okay, so they're the peacekeepers. What happens if that balance gets thrown off, though? Like if things get out of whack?
Well, that's when you can run into problems. Autoimmune diseases, for example.
Autoimmune diseases. That's when your immune system attacks your own body, right?
Exactly. It's like it gets its signals crossed and it starts mistaking your own cells, your own tissues, as dangerous invaders.
Huh.
Starts attacking them.
Oh, wow. So it's like friendly fire going on in there.
Pretty much. And that's where Tregs are so important. They help prevent that friendly fire, keep those self-reactive immune cells in check.
It's amazing how much is going on in there that we just have no idea about. Our sources mention there are different types of Tregs, though, right? Natural Tregs and induced Tregs? What's the difference?
Great question. It's about where they develop and you could say how they're trained. Natural Tregs, those are like the innate peacekeepers.
Okay.
They're produced in the thymus, which is, like the immune system's boot camp.
Right.
And they're basically pre-programmed to recognize and control those self-reactive T cells we talked about. They're preventing autoimmune responses from the get-go.
Ready to go right out of boot camp. What about those induced Tregs? How are they different?
Induced Tregs, those are more like the specialized negotiators.
Interesting.
They arise from regular CD4 plus T cells, but they're trained out in the field, so to speak, not in the thymus.
On the job training.
Yeah. So when these cells encounter certain antigens in a very specific way, they can actually turn into these induced Tregs.
So they're like peacekeeping specialists for certain situations.
Exactly. And they're super important for maintaining tolerance to things that are totally harmless, like think about food proteins or even the good bacteria that live in your gut.
You don't want your immune system going after those guys.
Definitely not. That would be a mess.
Yeah.
So yeah, these induced Tregs, they're key for making sure the immune system doesn't go overboard on stuff that's not actually a threat.
Wow, this whole checks and balances system is incredible. So we've got the helper T cells ready to fight and the Tregs keeping them in line. But what happens when that delicate dance goes wrong?
Well, we touched on it with autoimmunity, right? When there's not enough Treg activity, things can get out of control. You get those autoimmune disorders we were talking about, rheumatoid arthritis, 1 diabetes, lupus.
Those are all because the immune system is attacking the body itself.
Exactly. Those are all examples of what can happen when the immune system basically goes rogue, attacking your own tissues. But it's not just about not having enough Treg activity.
Oh, right. You're saying it's a balance, right?
Yes. As much as we don't want the immune system in overdrive all the time, we also don't want it to be too suppressed. Because if there's too much Treg activity,
what happens then?
then it can actually backfire. It can make it harder for your body to fight off actual infections or even, to control the growth of cancer cells.
Oh, wow. I didn't think about that.
It's about finding that sweet spot,
Right.
that perfect balance between being able to fight off threats, but not going overboard and harming your own body in the process.
It's a tightrope walk, for sure.
It really is. And scientists, researchers, they're still trying to understand all the little details of how these cells communicate, how we can influence them. It's all about finding ways to treat these diseases, help people feel better.
So we've talked about the immune system kind of going rogue, attacking healthy cells. But what about the opposite problem? When it doesn't fight back enough? Our sources mention cancer. What's the connection with these T cells and something as serious as cancer?
That's a big one. You see, cancer cells, they're sneaky. They can actually hijack those off switches of the immune system we were just talking about. The Tregs, they use them for protection.
Wait, hold on. Cancer cells can trick the immune system into just leaving them alone. How does that even work?
It's pretty wild, actually. So cancer cells, they can send out signals that actually attract Tregs, bring them right to the tumor.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and once the Tregs are there, they basically create this environment where the immune system is, suppressed. It's like those killer T cells can't even see the cancer cells, let alone destroy them.
So it's like they're building a fortress
Yeah.
and then putting up camouflage so nobody knows they're there.
Exactly. And that's a big part of why cancer is so difficult to treat. It's got all these tricks. But the good news is, understanding all this interplay between the immune system and cancer, it's opening up these whole new ways to treat it.
Like immunotherapy. I think that was mentioned in one of the articles.
Exactly. Immunotherapy, it's all about using the power of your own immune system to fight the disease. And when we're talking about cancer, that usually means, either boosting the activity of those cancer-fighting helper T cells or kind of the opposite, releasing the brakes that those cancer cells have put on the immune system by suppressing those Tregs.
So give the good guys a power-up or take away the bad guys' ability to hide.
You got it. And there are all sorts of different ways to do this. One that's really showing promise, it's called CAR T-cell therapy.
CAR T-cell therapy. Rings a bell. I think I skimmed over that. It seemed really complicated.
It is complicated, yeah, but it's also, like, really cool. Basically, with SANAR T-cell therapy, doctors take some of your own T-cells, those conductors we've been talking about this whole time,
Okay.
and they genetically engineer them in the lab so they can recognize specific proteins that are found on cancer cells.
So it's like giving those T-cells a crash course in,
Yeah.
like, enemy identification.
Exactly. They're like, here's what to look for, go get them. And these supercharged T-cells, they're called SANAR T-cells now, they're grown up, huge numbers of them, and then they're infused back into the patient.
Wow. And because they know exactly what to look for,
They can launch a much more targeted attack.
it's incredible. But also kind of, I don't know, sounds a little scary. Messing with the immune system like that, even for a good cause,
Yeah.
seems like there could be side effects.
You're right to think about that for sure. Anytime you're, tinkering with the immune system, there's always a chance things could go not as planned. One of the, I guess, more common side effects of SANAR T-cell therapy is something called cytokine release syndrome.
Cytokine release syndrome. That doesn't sound good.
It's basically, remember how we were talking about cytokines being those chemical messengers?
Yeah.
Well, CRS happens when those engineered SAR T cells, they just release a ton of cytokines all at once.
So the immune system goes into overdrive.
Exactly. And while that big immune response, it is the goal, it's what we want to happen, sometimes it can be too much, too fast, high fever, chills, even organ damage in some cases.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it's definitely a balancing act, You want that strong immune response to wipe out the cancer, but you got to keep it from becoming dangerous to the body itself.
That's intense. This has been incredible, though. I mean, who knew these tiny little cells we've been talking about, the helper T cells, regulatory T cells, that they were responsible for so much?
Right.
This deep dive has given me a whole new appreciation for, like, the power of the immune system and also just how complex it really is.
It really is amazing. And we've only scratched the surface. There's still so much we don't know.
That's what's kind of exciting, though, right?
Exactly. So much potential for new discoveries, new treatments. But as we learn more, and especially as these immunotherapies, they get even more sophisticated, even more powerful. We have to think about the ethics of it all, too. What are the potential consequences, good and bad, that we need to be prepared for? It's a brave new world, this kind of immune system manipulation.
It really is. Lots to think about, that's for sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Till next time.